I'm sure that there are some of you who can relate to this scenario. Have you ever had family members or friends return home from a fabulous vacation and they want to invite you over to tell you all about it and to show you hundreds of pictures from their trip? Has that ever happened to you? Now, see, I like evenings like that, but I know that there are a lot of people who dread them. And I can understand why. Because, honestly, the trip is never really as interesting and exciting for you as it was for the people who actually went on the trip. So I get it. Well, guess what? Today's homily is going to be all about the trip that 20 of us took to Spain last month. Oh, and it gets even better. On the Friendship Hall TV during our potluck, we're going to show you hundreds of pictures from our trip. Now, don't go running for the exit, because I promise you, the journey you're going to hear about this morning is your journey too. So right now, I'd like to call up a few of our pilgrims who are going to tell you a little bit about our experience. Come on up. We'll start with Bob.
Thank you, Nancy, for your sticks. So I'm a lawyer, and Sal told me I had to read what I wrote. Otherwise, I'd be talking 5 minutes from now. So I'm Bob from Michigan. At least that's how I would introduce myself on the Camino. And here are 3 things that I learned. The first was to acknowledge people I came in contact with. Everyone acknowledges each other on the Camino. Whether I pass someone or someone passes me, it's always buen camino, buen camino. Everybody did that. And it reminded me that we were all on this walk together. And we all benefit from being acknowledged. We're all together on the Camino that we call life. So I'm going to try and be more intentional about acknowledging the people I pass. The second thing I learned was the inner aspect of my life is more important than the physical aspect of my life. We were all hurting, no matter how hard we trained or didn't train. From the hip on down, something was always hurting. But on the Camino, I found it was easier to take my pain and put it in the back of my bus instead of letting it be my driver. So Sal tells us every Sunday to take time to go within, walking each day without any distraction and without any responsibility gave me that time to go within. So I'm starting to get it, Sal. I'm starting to get it. So the Camino gave me the time to be totally present to the present. And that is something that I'm not really used to doing, but it was certainly very helpful. And the third thing is God provides, and I need to wake up and see it. Our guides drum into us the message that the Camino provides. They said, don't worry about the long journey. They promised us people would be there to support us and help us on our way or help us if we needed blisters taken care of or we needed a bathroom. The Camino would provide. And I found that to be true. And I now understand that Camino in that context is code for God, because God does provide, always. I just have not slowed down enough to acknowledge God at work in my life. I saw it on the walk because there were no distractions. Now I'm challenged to look past my distractions to see God at work because God provides. I said I learned these things, but my challenge now is to integrate them into my life here in Douglas. And there was one last thing. They also told us we needed to hydrate. And I've always wanted a cup of this juice that he's been drinking. Thank you very much. Buen camino.
Good morning, church. Amen. Okay. I wish you all could have had the Camino experience. I had one goal for the trip, and that was to really get to know my fellow travelers and pilgrims. And I accomplished this as we walked along, shared meals, shared stories and conversations well into the night. The rhythm of walking along mile after mile helped me to soften and enter a solace and quiet that the Camino provided. My heart and spirit began to heal, and I could honestly feel love building in my heart. There was nothing else but love and gratitude. So I brought the Camino home with me, and now it is my choice and challenge to continue my walk. And I'll need to locate those moving portals that the signposts to my Camino.
What Demetria didn't share was that she was our comedian on the trip and told a joke at every meal. So I was expecting something a little lighter, I'm going to be honest. I wanted to share, before I go into the heavy stuff, an incident that I will call #SmallWorld. When we were walking, as everyone has pointed out, hello, I'm Kathleen from Michigan and Peter from Michigan, and we ran into a group of people, and they were from Gilbert, Arizona. And they didn't say Phoenix, they said Gilbert. And I said, oh my goodness, that's amazing. My college roommate is from Gilbert. She lives in Gilbert, Arizona. That's so cool. And that's kind of small world. Like how often would you meet someone from there? We got home, and I heard from my college roommate. And she said, the weirdest thing happened. I was at Aqua Size yesterday, and I overheard a woman talking about getting back from her trip to Spain. And she said, I asked her, where did you go? And she said, oh, I walked the Camino. My roommate said, oh, that's so weird. My college roommate just got back. She said, where's she from? Michigan. And we met someone from Michigan. So, small world. Okay, so everyone's talking about what they've assimilated. Mine is more of a moment that kind of defined my trip. While everyone on our Camino trip was enjoying getting to know each other and our fellow pilgrims, Pastor Sal had encouraged each of us to spend some part of our walk alone. Believe it or not, this is easier to do than you might think. Frequently, because of everyone's unique gait and pace, you could find yourself absolutely alone on the road with no one in front of you and no one behind you, despite being on the same path as hundreds of others. The first time I found myself completely alone, it caught me by surprise, and not in a good way. As you might expect, we all began with much spirit and enthusiasm. After all, our first day of walking on Friday was only 12 miles. On Saturday, our first 14-mile day, we all began to slow down as blisters and sore muscles emerged. My personal challenge appeared on Sunday, the third day, when physical pain and fatigue were everyone's constant companions. And it happened in the one section of the Camino that was not gorgeous and pastoral. Instead of gently rolling hills and picturesque farms, I first noticed that I was completely alone in a rather unattractive area. Cars whizzed by on the right-hand 4-lane highway. On the left was a vast trucking depot, but being Sunday, it was eerily still and quiet in a Stephen King way. Suddenly, I realized that no one was ahead of me and no one was behind. My first thought was that, lost in contemplation, I had missed one of the iconic stone markers designed to keep pilgrims on the right path. Stopping, I considered walking back to find the last marker, but the idea of adding unnecessary steps on the third day seemed painfully absurd. My next thought was to jog ahead to quickly find the next marker. After 5 steps, my feet and legs screamed at me to stop. In that moment, my otherness overwhelmed me. My passport was ahead in Peter's backpack, so I was a weary American who did not speak the language, alone in Spain, possibly completely off the path. I wanted to sit down and cry. Instead, I stopped in my tracks, took several deep breaths, and considered my place in the world. Suddenly, a mantra actually came to me, and it's something that Sal has told us. I'm in the flow, I'm in the flow, I'm in the flow. My feet started moving again, slowly but with purpose. In about 10 very long minutes, I caught up to someone wearing a backpack, the true sign of the pilgrim. Relief flooded me. You see, despite my very worst fears, I was not really lost, and I was not alone.
It's tough going last because you took all my best stuff. That's all I'm going to say. All right, so when I approached this, I think my motive was to also try to help you see, because it was a remarkable journey, and journeys like this exist elsewhere as well, and if you can ever do it, I would encourage you to. I didn't journal on the trip because every waking moment offered the possibility of what might be next, or would be new, or would just be nice to be a part of. It was on all the time, even if you were sitting still. So I figured I'd get home, journal like crazy, and write a great story, and that has not happened. So I came up with a plan B after we were asked to do this, and I came up with a list of prompts for myself to say, okay, let's find some things about this, because the Camino experience unfolds after the event as well as on the event. So my prompts all started with, in what way did the journey... And so my first one, in what way was the journey as I expected? And as I expected, as has been noted, it was very physically challenging. It wasn't necessarily steep hills, but the hills were steep, or big valleys, but there were valleys. And very quickly, by the end of each day, we hurt. And hurting didn't just stop an hour later. Sometimes it went all night. So it was painful, and the blisters that many people experienced were gruesome. Also, as expected, I anticipated, being this was the UCC, we'd be surrounded by a wonderful group of people, and we were. We were diverse, fun, funny, kind, loving, flexible, and all committed to getting there wherever and whenever there was that day. It was more than I expected because it was very mentally stimulating. We were blessed to open each day with history lessons about where we were on this particular trail and this day, the buildings, the people who'd walk there, all of those things. And I think, at least for me personally, and I suspect for everybody, that elevated everything to a different level of awe and fascination about where we were. Better than I expected, the tour bus. Absolutely. I don't even like tour buses. I love this bus. Who knew how much we'd all come to appreciate seeing it at the end of our walk? And the guides, our beautiful guides, Jose, Luis, and Alex, were exceptional. They coached, coordinated, directed, supported, and made sure we were all well fed and always getting hugs. They took an interest in each of us. They cared deeply that we personally discovered the power of the Camino. And they ended each day tending our aches and pains and sewing up blisters. In terms of what wasn't expected, prior to heading for Spain, like a good student, about a day before I read about the back 100 kilometers we were going to be on, just so I knew where we were going. And it said it would be crowded, and it said it was going to be mostly farmland. So it wasn't crowded, as somebody else noticed. You would start the morning feeling like there are a lot of people, and I don't know where they all went, but they just melt away. And you'd be alone a lot. And yeah, I'm not only alone looking down a tunnel of trees and seeing nobody, but turning around and seeing nobody, and often feeling that unease of, wow, this is really cool, but where am I? But the farmland piece in the United States, farmland is like flat, and in Spain, farmlands, they have farms on hillsides and valleys. And so that was the up, down, around, under that we all discovered in our walk. Less than I expected. We got a lot less sleep. A lot less sleep. People in Spain eat very late. We did. And we got up early and asked somebody about the rock concert the night before we started walking that started at midnight and ended at 2:30 with the song Highway to Hell. I kid you not. That is such a true story. 3 hours later, we're starting our first walk going, we're going to die. So I thought about the thing that really emerged in me, and it's such a basic thing along the way. I began to truly appreciate these little painted arrows that were everywhere. And that sounds obvious because, of course, they're arrows and they tell you where to go. But the guidepost things that were official were way too far apart. And there were many opportunities to go astray. And many of us found those. So you'd always look for these arrows, and I don't know when they got painted, who painted. Some of them looked ancient. They were on brick walls, stone walls, gate posts, on sides of buildings where like the one sign would say, go here to buy your groceries, but then the little arrow would say, but go here to go where you want to go. And they were faded. You'd have to go back and look for them. We did go back. You know, without your little arrows, you'd lost your way. And so that became to me more than just arrows. They're beautiful. I took tons of pictures of them. I hope we get to present some of those to you. But I look for my arrows, and I think what was really neat about them is we don't know even who put them there, but they're there for us, and we all know that we need our arrows. Coming home after the Camino, the personal discovery for me kind of evolved over time. I always was fascinated by these walks that people have done before us. This started in the 9th century. By the 12th century, 250,000 people were walking the 500 to 1,000 miles, and they didn't have Nikes. And and a lot of them didn't make it, and a lot of them didn't return. And you ask yourself, why? You know, spiritual awareness, yes, but it's bigger than that. So when I got home and started seeing all the news about the caravans, and I'd watched it, and I think we've all grown I've grown numb. I had a moment and thought, oh my goodness, look at them. They're walking 1,000 miles with no knowledge of what they're going to find, who's going to greet them, will they be welcome, but they're going to find their way, and they're going to find a better life. And that was really a shift for me. It put in perspective my 75 miles, our 75 miles, that even today there are pilgrims doing what pilgrims have always done, which is walking to find a better way. So that's my Camino.
Thank you to our pilgrims for sharing their stories. You'll notice that we who went on the trip are wearing these yellow neck scarves. They not only protected us from the elements, but they also identified us as pilgrims. And the color yellow is the color of the arrows, which Sarah spoke about, that guided us along the way. And I couldn't help, as I was walking, to think about Dorothy from The Wizard of Oz following the yellow brick road. And she was hoping it would guide her home. Now, as she was walking, we know she faced a lot of obstacles and she faced a lot of difficulties, but she had a group of people with her, a group of friends journeying with her. And that really was the story of my Camino for me. Now, the word Camino means the way, the way. And we know from the Christian scripture that throughout the Gospels, Jesus spoke of the way. He instructed us to follow the way. And it's not just in Christianity. Our friends of the Eastern faith traditions also speak of the way. Many of you are familiar with the Eastern sacred text known as the Tao Te Ching. That's what the word Tao means, the way. So you may not have traveled with us to Spain, but if you are consciously following the way, if you are consciously walking the spiritual path each and every day of your life, you are walking the Camino. Because that's what the Camino is. The arrows are pointing within. It's the inner way, the inner journey. On the very, very first day of our trip, our tour guides gave me this card to read to the group. It says, the inner Camino. And it says, the Camino is an inner journey where my steps take me even deeper within myself. My steps take me deeper within myself. That, my friends, is the spiritual journey. That's the journey we're all walking, to go deeper and deeper within ourselves. Why? Because Jesus said, the kingdom of heaven is within you. The journey is within. That's God's dwelling place. And I'll let you know that on my Camino, I felt the presence of God with me and within me. And the message that I got was, I'm always with you, and I'm taking care of you. And God came to me in the guise of the Divine Mother. And I think the reason that happened was because I was walking the Camino in memory of my own mother, Dorothy, who died in 2013. I felt called as I was packing for Spain to find a picture of my mother. And so I have this old shoebox that I took from her house after she died that had all of her photographs in it. And I found one when she was really young, before she gave birth to me. And next to the picture, I found this old, beat-up booklet, all yellow-taped and dog-eared, falling apart. And it is a little devotional prayer book to a saint to whom I was unfamiliar, called Saint Gerard Magella. When I got to Spain, I was reading this little booklet in my room one night, and I discovered that Saint Gerard was the patron saint of mothers, and that women who were trying to get pregnant and having difficulties would pray to this saint, hoping to become pregnant. Now, I knew that my mother suffered from several miscarriages before I was born, and we never really spoke about it. But for me to discover that booklet and to know my mother kept it all those years and taped it, she was letting me know on the Camino, I wanted you so much, and I'm still with you, and I'm still caring for you. Well, as we heard, we were all suffering in great physical pain on the Camino. And one day when we got to our next hotel, I said, please let me have a bathtub in my room, because I wanted to soak my feet. And when we got to that hotel, right outside my room in the hallway was a little baby's cradle. And that was so odd, because in this hotel, we were the only guests, the people from our group. So there were no babies, but there was this cradle in the hallway. And as I looked, I noticed it was between room 12 and room 13. And my birthday is December 13th. And when I walked into the room, sure enough, for the first time on our trip, I had a bathtub. So it was Mom, my mom and the Divine Mother, saying once again, I am always with you. I am here. I'm always taking care of you. Now, some of you may have heard that we had some difficulty coming home from Spain. We had a very tight connection in Madrid. Our group got held up at a passport checkpoint. It was so crowded, and after that, we had to run from one section of the airport to the other. Most of our group made the connecting flight, except for 3 of us, Sam and Jane and me. When we got to the gate, the boarding door had just closed, and they wouldn't let us on. And they told us that all that they could do for us was put us on the next day's flight. And so the 3 of us spent 24 hours in the airport. Now, as Sam and I that night got on the cold, hard floor to try to sleep, Jane went for a walk around the airport. Now, at this point, all of the shops and restaurants in the airport are closed. It's the middle of the night. But Jane came back so excited. She said, "Come, follow me." Jane found this hidden alcove in a little secret part of the airport. It was this little curved wall. You would never think to look behind it, but she did. And behind that wall were 3 empty beds. As if they were prepared just for us. You'll see a picture of it, okay? And as I got into that bed, I started to cry because I thought once again, the Divine Mother was providing. I am with you, I am caring for you. And then it hit me. Of all the people in our group, I was with Jane and Sam, who are a mother and son. So that extra 24 hours in the airport, that was part of my Camino. That was the Divine Mother saying, I want to make sure you get it, that no matter what you go through, I am with you, and I am taking care of you. I want to thank you this morning for allowing us to share our stories with you. And I hope that the stories of our Camino inspire you on your Camino, on your spiritual journey. I hope they inspire you to, as you keep walking consciously the spiritual path, to expect miracles, to look for signs of God's presence all around you, and to follow those yellow arrows, the guidance of spirit, which is guiding you within to God's dwelling place, that place of peace and love and joy, that place where God is still speaking. Buen Camino and Namaste.